Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 683. And today's date is June 2nd, 2015. And the title of this episode is U.S. Forces Are Building Up in the Middle East for the Next Offensive. Now, before I get started, I just want to let everyone know that interview with Rob Kirby is now live. You can go to the X22 Report Spotlight, and you can see the video there, or you can come to the X22Report.com site. It is on the right-hand side. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece, they're running out of time. June 5th is coming up very, very quickly here. And Greece submitted a 46-page draft agreement to the creditors. And they're saying that creditors are still far from a deal with Greece. They haven't come to any type of an agreement. Progress on Greece is still very slow. It's insufficient. And it looks like at this point in time that Greece will not make a deal this week. But Greece is saying that they have the money to make the next payment. They're saying that they have the 300 million euros. And what they've been doing is they've been scraping the cash together from internal resources. They've been looking everywhere under rocks, in empty bank vaults, and they found the money. So we will have to see if they actually make this payment, because after this payment, they have many more, and they are really running out of time here. And we know at this point in time that they've been making agreements with Russia. They've been talking to the BRIC nations, and it looks like it's in their best interest to go with Russia or the BRIC system, or both. And it seems like they're continually putting and stalling and seeing where this is going to go. And eventually they're going to run out of this money wherever they're finding it. And it's going to end up in a default somehow, some way, unless out of some type of miracle they come to an agreement with the creditors. They don't impose austerity. They don't hit the pension systems or make drastic changes. Because if they do any of these things, the people will riot. Because this is not the government they voted for. They want growth. They want their jobs back. They want their homes. This is what they're looking for. We understand in the Eurozone, they're continually telling us that they're creating all this money to help the economy. Well, we know it's not to help the economy. It's not to help the man on the street. It's not to help retail. It's not to help real estate. It's to help the bankers. It's to help the banks. It's to put more money in their pockets before the system comes crumbling down. And we see the Eurozone is not doing as well as they thought it was going to do. The Eurozone factory growth was weaker than previously thought last month. To restore economic growth and combat deflation, the ECB started buying around 60 billion euros a month on mainly government bonds in March, and the survey suggested it is having no effect whatsoever. Of course it isn't. Did QE in the United States have any effect? Yes, on the central bankers and the elite, but on the everyday common man, no. It had no effect. On retail, no. On the housing market, no, except for creating that bubble. So it didn't spur economic growth. It didn't create jobs. Actually, it had the opposite effect. And we're seeing that France's manufacturing sector is still in decline, and Germany is only seeing a very meager growth. So the Eurozone is in trouble, and a lot of these countries are in recession, depression. They're on the verge of collapse. Here in the United States, we've been tracking the Baltic Dry Index, and we see that it's been below 600. And every time it gets above 600, it's because the capsize rates increase or something else occurs that has nothing to do with factories increasing production because of people ordering more goods. We're not seeing that whatsoever. And once the capsize rates level off, we see the Baltic Dry Index fall right back down. And we see the Baltic Dry Index is still below 600. But what's very interesting here in the United States, what we're seeing is that It fits what we're talking about. Factory orders have tumbled by 0.4% month on month in April. They were expecting only a 0.1% decline, but it was much larger than their expectations. This comes after March's surge by 2.2%. Now, where did that come from? That was from the government. This is the 6th month in a row, year on year, of declines in factory orders. Something we haven't seen since the recession. That tells us something. That tells us we're actually in a recession. Actually, this is more like a depression. They're just hiding everything. On a month-on-month basis, the picture is even worse. 9 misses in the last 10 months. 8 negative prints in the last 9 months. We are in a depression moving towards a collapse. Yes, the government is creating an illusion that everything is fine with all their statistical numbers. But what we're looking at and what we're reporting on right now makes a lot more sense than what the government is telling us, because we see it with our own eyes, we hear it with our own ears, and we feel it. If retail is collapsing and stores aren't expanding and they're closing and going out of business and people are getting laid off, and corporations are laying off not 100 people, 1,000 people, tens of thousands of people, something is going on here. When we see more and more people getting unemployed and they can't find work, something is wrong. Even though they tell us the unemployment rate is at 5.4%. Something is very, very wrong. We see the people here in the United States are having trouble making it a full month. They run out of money about 20 days into a month until their next paycheck. And right now, the number of people who are tapping in to alternative financial services, it's on the rise. And what do I mean by this? Well, they're turning to non-bank lenders for credit, payday loans, refund anticipation loans, pawn shops, rent-to-own services. According to the Urban Institute report, the number of households that use alternative credit products increased by 7%. 47% of the respondents say they either could not cover an emergency expense costing $400, and most of them who don't have this money, they would have to sell something or borrow the money to cover these costs. So we see people are looking at alternative ways to support their everyday living expenses. This is not to go out and purchase a new HD TV, to purchase a DVD player. People who are going to these non-bank situations are using it for everyday living expenses just to get by, because most of these people don't have work, or a lot of the people have part-time work, and they're just not bringing enough in to make it. This is what we are seeing. So this 5.4% unemployment number, how possibly can this be true? It isn't. It's an illusion, because think about it. 93 million plus people out of the workforce. And the 5.4% number they're giving us includes those people who went from a full-time to a part-time job. If they went from a full-time to 2 part-time jobs, it's counted twice. So we can see right now, all they do is continually manipulate all these numbers. That is all they do to convince everyone we're in a recovery. Now, we understand a lot of corporations love to write their own bills for their own purposes. We see the insurance company wrote their own law, which is called the Affordable Care Act. And of course, they wrote it so it would benefit them, not the people, but them, the government. Because you can see with Obamacare right now, they wrote it with the help of the government, to have no competition, to keep the prices of insurance high, to give you the worst benefit possible. Yes, you can get the better benefits. You just have to pay a lot more money. But a lot of people don't have this. They work with the government to say, listen, we can make a lot of money out of this. Because what we need to do is get every single American into this system, and everyone will have health insurance, and we will make a fortune because we will give them $5,000, $10,000 deductibles. Their premiums each month will be a lot. They'll never hit these deductibles. We'll never have to issue any payments. This is a win-win for the insurance and the government. And the government can include all these different taxes and put a penalty on people to force them into the system. Because really, when you look at this, it's exactly what we had before. What has changed? Nothing. Nothing has changed. People are still paying for the same insurance, but their insurance coverage is a lot less. The insurance company did it to benefit themselves. Now we see the chemical companies. It works so well with the insurance companies. They're saying, you know something? We need to create our own law, our own bill, and introduce it into Congress. Bill S697. The chemical industry is about to be given free rein to write their own safety standards. Congress hasn't passed a chemical control bill since 1976 with the Toxic Substance Control Act. But this was even broken from the start, according to the Environmental Working Group. The TSCA grandfathered in thousands of chemicals that were already on the market at the time, even though most of them were extremely hazardous to human health. That act didn't even allow the EPA to ban asbestos, which is known to cause cancer. This new bill would essentially give companies like Monsanto, Dow, Bayer, and many others the authority to call their own toxic chemicals safe, when regulatory bodies elsewhere have called them carcinogenic and even deadly. Bill S697 is the brainchild of the chemical industry. It has spent an enormous amount of money on the lobbying for this bill, $190 million. There are certain sponsors for this bill. Tom Udall, he received about $49,000 from the chemical industry in 2014, plus $23,000 from lobbyists employed by the American Chemistry Council. Republican sponsor David Vitters, he received about $20,000 in 2014 and $14,000 from the American Chemistry Council lobbyist. This bill does absolutely nothing to keep the people safe. It goes to the chemical companies to increase their profits, to protect them. All of this should be wiped out. There is no company that should be allowed to write their own bills in Congress. The congressman should never be able to take money in their campaign from any corporation. This should be completely outlawed. I mean, think about it. The SEC in many of the companies, I'm talking about the low-level employees, if they catch someone going out to dinner and a company is paying for it and they have the ability to manipulate something in the computer systems, they can go to prison. Shouldn't it be the same thing in our government? But we see that's not how it works today. And when we create a new government here in the United States, we need to change this and make this completely illegal. And if they accept anything, it's called a bribe. Now, we understand the Patriot Act. It expired. But we know the U.S. government central bankers, they're continually spying on the American people. They've done it way before the Patriot Act. They just used the Patriot Act to say, see, we have the legal right to do so. Now they're back in the darkness of night spying on every single person. So nothing has really changed. And they're trying to push forth the USA Freedom Act. Now, everyone believes that, they're not spying on me. Now I don't need encryption. I can let down my guard. I don't have to protect myself. It's almost like the government coming out and saying, listen, we've done away with crime. Don't worry about it. You don't need locks on your doors. You don't have to lock up your valuables. You can leave it wide open. It's okay. Do you really believe them? Do you really believe that they're not spying on you anymore? That's absolutely just ridiculous, because they are. And there are all different ways that they can do this. They haven't dismantled anything. They're continually using what they have. Right now, we're seeing that there are parts of the Patriot Act, which allows them to continually spy on the people. So we can see there's actually loopholes in the Patriot Act that would keep one expiring provision more or less alive. Section 215 in the existing version of the law allows the government to obtain any records deemed relevant to an investigation of a terrorist or a spy. As of Monday, the criterion switches back to the pre-Patriot Act standards of records that pertain to such an investigation. But thanks to a little notice grandfather clause in the law, the relevance standard will remain available for investigations already open at the time of sunset. So all they have to say is, no, this was already open, so we can continually spy on this. They really don't have to give any proof. And we can see at this point in time, they will use all of this to allow them to continually spy on the American people. And all the USA Freedom Act does is shift who's doing the actual spying to the corporations. And then all that information is then just moved over to their data centers. That's all that's happening right now. Even the EFFF provided many examples how the government can still conduct authorized surveillance of individuals. Pen registers can be used to collect dialing, routing, addressing, or signaling information, including telephone numbers, dialed and internet metadata such as IP addresses and email headers. 2 pen register statutes exist, one that covers foreign intelligence surveillance and the other for law enforcement. The law requires that only be used in criminal or national security investigations. And what can they possibly do? They can say this is a national security investigation. So they really aren't going to stop spying on the American people. And this is why you have to take the responsibility into your own hands. You have to protect yourself, just like you protect your home, just like you put a lock on your door. You might have a safe in your home. Well, you need to lock up your private information on your phone, on your computer, wherever it is. We all need to do this. If we all do this and don't use the encryption they're giving us or any other type of technique or whatever type of material you want to use to protect yourself, the government will have a harder and harder time listening in. It will make it very difficult for them. This is why they're screaming about encryption, because they don't want people to use it. They're trying to scare everyone that, if you use encryption and we make it legal and everyone uses it, well, it's already illegal. It's already legal. If everyone has it and the companies don't give us the keys, then, these terrorists, which it was proven that the Patriot Act never found any of them, never stopped any of them, we won't be able to stop a false flag, which exactly that's what it is. It's a false flag because the terrorist is the government. We see the USA Freedom Act mandate has now cleared the Senate hurdle. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully because they want this passed so they can continue with spying on every single person. We see these scare tactics are already being pushed out into the news. We see there is bomb threats that were phoned into the airports. Now, if the NSA was only up and running, they would have stopped that. No, they wouldn't have, because it's still up and running. They've never stopped anything. They never caught a terrorist. But we can see already they're starting to use the fear tactics on the American people. What turned out to be a hoax led to police searching a U.S. Airways flight and its passengers after it landed at Philadelphia International Airport. the bomb threat was not found to be credible, and there were at least 5 other bomb threats that were phoned in. And we're probably most likely going to see this increase as time goes on, because they really want that USA Freedom Act passed. And they're trying to scare everyone that the terrorists are coming after us. We see that the TSA agents failed to catch 95% of mock bombs and weapons. So out of the tests that they were using to test these agents, TSA agents failed 67 out of the 70 tests. They passed only 3 times out of all those tests. So what does this tell us? Since TSA was placed in the airports, they have never stopped or found a terrorist. And they never had the ability to do so. This was for show. This was to convince the people that there were terrorists, to make people get scanned, to make people be searched, to control the people, to keep them in line. So this whole thing tells us that there are no terrorists. Because if they failed 67 out of the 70 tests, a terrorist would have snuck something in over all of these years. 14 years. Nothing. The Patriot Act with the NSA surveillance, nothing. Because the terrorists are the government. They're the ones who do this, who create these incidents that where they use them on the people to convince them of things they normally wouldn't do, like give up their rights, go to war. That's all it is. But the CIA is out there. The Central Intelligence Agency has insisted that the United States should continue snooping on telephone conversations of millions of Americans in order to stop terrorist attacks. Yes, Brennan is out there, and he's saying that we need to spy on everybody to keep this country safe. Well, no, we don't. Because I don't know if he's looked at this, but there's the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and there's their 4th Amendment. And it seems like none of these people like to abide by it. They don't even care about it. And they keep using the same thing. We need to keep the Americans safe. No, we need to get you out of it, then we'll be safe. Because you are the terrorists. You're the one, your agency and many other agencies create these events. But they don't want to tell you that part. They want to tell you that, the terrorists are coming to get you. So we need to look in your home. We need to watch you every day. We need to spy on you. And they do this on purpose. You know what's very interesting about all of this? The U.S. government continually tells us that they want to keep us safe, but they don't want to give us weapons. They want to take the weapons away from the people, make it harder and harder. They infringe on our rights. And these two stories conflict with each other. Because if I'd like to feel safe, I like to have a weapon in my hand if there's real terrorists running around the United States. Wouldn't that be the best thing? To have 300 and something million people with weapons to fight against the terrorists? Actually, the terrorists would think twice of coming to the United States. Whoa, everyone has a gun. If we even make a move in a deli or another place, we're going to have, 40, 50 weapons pointed at us, and this false flag is really not going to go anywhere. But when we look at what's really going on around the world, we see that from the Small Arms Survey, Weapons and the World, of these small arms trade, they doubled between 2001 and 2011. So, which country is exporting small arms? And of course, these small arms, they are things like submachine guns, rifles, assault rifles, little machine guns, things like that. Well, it's the United States. And every time we saw an Arab Spring or something where we saw a puppet regime put into place, the exports of the small arms here in the United States increased. And we also see the small arms into the United States increase. And of course, as we know, these weapons go to other places. So the government is telling us that weapons are bad. We need to come down hard on the American people. We need to take away the weapons. But the United States exports more weapons than any other country to all of these different little countries. And then they import the same weapons. They want to keep us safe, but they don't want us to have weapons. So you can see how all their stories are conflicting with each other. And if weapons are so bad, why are they exporting so many to the Middle East during the time there were Arab Springs? Think about this for a second. Because they are behind all of this. And when I say they, it's the United States government, central bankers. Now, we all understand, and it's really been established right now, that the Ukraine coup d'etat was driven by the United States government central bankers. And we can see that George Soros right now was a big influence in this coup d'etat. The hacker collective Cyber has exposed the billionaire's emails. And there were a certain number of documents, 3 of them, which showed that, yeah, he was behind it. There were emails going to President Poroshenko, and he laid out a short and medium term strategy for the new Ukraine. And he was telling Poroshenko, he was telling the people that were in power in Ukraine that Ukraine needs to get lethal weapons. He was writing to the people in the United States, these government officials, saying that yes, we should bring in lethal military assistance equal to the opposing force. He explained to Poroshenko that he needs to gain control of the financial markets in Ukraine. And he says that while all this is happening, they need to regain control of the southeastern and Crimean area. And while you're doing this, make sure they don't find out that you're doing all this and you're continually shelling the southeastern people. Make it look like you're abiding by the Minsk agreement. And we know that this was staged. We know it was a coup d'etat. This has happened in many other countries. And of course, we know the U.S. government is behind all of this. They even blamed the MH17 on first Russia, then that kind of died off, then the southeastern people. But we see a Buk missile manufacturer. They revealed that their findings show that the Buk M1 system was actually used, and Russia doesn't possess this. Ukraine does. Actually, they're willing to stage an experiment at its own expense, proving the MH17 was down by a missile launch from the Buk M1 system. Now, we know there was a Ukrainian fighter jet following the aircraft. We know it was shot at and there were bullet holes. And I do believe it was also a missile shot that hit the plane at the same time. And they're saying that they have evidence that this was the missile because they did work for the Ukraine Armed Forces back in 2005, where they wanted to prolong the life of these weapons, and they had 991 such of these type of missiles on hand. And right now they're saying they want the U.S. to produce the satellite data because they had satellite imagery above, and this can prove that, yeah, it was the Ukrainian side. They even went back and they can see where the projectile came from. But of course, as we know, the United States is not going to hand over the satellite imagery. They're going to stay quiet about this. They want this to be forgotten at this point in time. Ukraine right now is saying they're planning to seize Russian foreign property to compensate for the lost Crimea. Russia is saying, well, we're going to fight them and do whatever we can to stop Ukraine trying to take our property. We see out in the Black Sea, the Russian jet flew very, very close to the USS Ross, and there is video footage of this. There were no weapons on the Russian jet whatsoever. And of course, both sides flexing their muscle. They were both in international water. And the video was put out there, and I do have it on the X22Report.com site. Russia's going to start a new nuclear plant in Iran. They're going to start this on Monday. And we can see Russia and Iran are becoming closer and closer with each other. We see the State Department out in the Middle East. They're saying that they have no evacuation plans whatsoever for the citizens of Yemen. They are on their own. So we can see right now the United States government central bankers, they don't care about the citizens of the United States. All they care about is continually waging war and putting the puppet government back into Yemen. That's it. That's all they care about. Remember, central bankers have no allegiance to any country or people. The allegiance is to themselves. And we can see right now where their allegiance lies. So this is not a government for the United States whatsoever. Washington now is coming out saying they're very concerned about the Islamic State in Libya. They're deeply concerned because the Islamic State is gaining a foothold in Libya, very close to the Mediterranean Sea, and we can see they are definitely building up for something to occur in Libya, like a major offensive. U.S. Secretary of State Jeff Rathke is out there saying land under the Islamic State control is increasing at this time. U.S. is going to send in about 2,000 anti-tank missiles to Iraq. And of course, as we know, most of this is going to be funneled into Syria for the main offensive. They're going to help the Islamic State, which is their proxy army, to get into Damascus to remove Assad. Russia is out there saying that, listen, this U.S.-led coalition is a mistake. You need to work with Assad. All these bombings, everything that's going on here is without the permission of the president of Syria. You are in a sovereign country, but the United States doesn't care about this because their mission is to go after Assad. The goal has always been the same. We see the propaganda is out there today where the U.S. is saying Syria is working with the Islamic State. They're supporting the Islamic State in the bombing of Aleppo. Now, this doesn't even make sense. Why would Syria work with the Islamic State to bomb Aleppo? Of course, they're using this propaganda at this point in time because they need to make the connection between Syria and the Islamic State so they can go into Syria. And if you think about it, the United States government is trying to convince everyone that they can't stop the Islamic State. They've increased their land, and now they control 50% of Syria. But think about what the United States has, and the coalition forces have in this area. They have drones. They have spy satellites right above, focused in this area. They have the best equipment, and they can't spot the brigades of the Islamic State with the lines of vehicles stretching to the sunset. They can't spot these people. They have AWACS in the air 24/7. They have air power, billions and billions of dollars worth of surveillance air power. And they can't spot the Toyota trucks, which are supplied to them by the U.S. government, in a line going in all different directions. They can't spot the 2,300 Humvees. Think about this for a second. Actually, talking about the Humvees, Humvees are run on diesel fuel. And in Iraq and Syria, there's not a lot of diesel fuel. Where are they getting the fuel for this? Think about that for a second. They're getting it from the United States. The Islamic State is the proxy army for the United States. And what they're telling us completely makes no sense whatsoever. And during the recent ISIS conquest of Ramadi, the U.S. pressured the Baghdad government to hold back Shiite militias and allow the Islamic State to take the city. The militias were held without transportation, only 30 miles from the front, units with a strong history of winning the fights. While all this was going on, air supply drops were spotted at least 3 times, and the lines of vehicles moving openly through the day in support of the Islamic State numbered in the hundreds. All this was happening with American pilots watching. Pilots were told to hold back. Those were the orders, because they didn't want them getting in the way. The Islamic State, they wanted them to get the equipment. They wanted this to happen. This is being done to create chaos, to split up Iraq, and to supply everything going into Syria. Right now, the White House is calling on Congress to move on the authorization for war. They're bringing up, look what's happening. There's 500 children kidnapped. There's relics that are being destroyed, beheadings, horrific events happening. The Islamic State has taken over Syria. We need the authorization for war. We need to bring troops in. And they're pushing Congress right now. We see the Pentagon shipped live anthrax to many different countries. Now, this is very interesting. The anthrax went to Australia, Canada, 12 states, South Korea, and Washington, D.C. North Korea is saying they were doing this because they were going to use it in North Korea. That's why it was shipped to South Korea. But very interestingly, it went to Australia. They had a terrorist attack with the Islamic State. It went to Canada. They had a terrorist attack with the Islamic State. It went to 12 different states and Washington. It looks like this might have been a false flag event that was completely botched. And it looks like they were trying to set everything up, but it didn't go as planned. Because as we know, whenever they have an event, and we can think back to 9/11, we can go back to the Boston bombing, anthrax or some other chemical was always used, and they always found it on the letters in Washington or other places. And we know it came from a military base in the United States. And it looks like this might have been a botched false flag event. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.